I am the body snatcher. You know we love tummy tucks on this show. Welcome back to Boxing.
Loyal fight fans to unboxing. You know to eat that shit up, dude. We just had a great weekend of fights take place and a great last week on unboxing. Being a guest appearance on the New MMA show. If you don't know about those guys, please go check out the last episode. It's up on my channel, and you can kind of get a feel for them. And go over and check out their channel for all the MMA takes, which they are fantastic at. Now, your boy himself is quite proud of the previews of the fights that we just saw and the picks, the predictions. It's easy to pick favorites. It's harder to pick close odds fights and even lean towards the underdog and say how it would happen. And it's harder to take a favorite and break that down. Say, let's make the best of this. Let's make the most out of your money, and we'll pick the exact way it happens. And really came through for you, you know. We got to toot our own horn when we're right, because we're not always right. But your boy was spot on. And just what a great fight Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano was. Fantastic, fan-friendly, and just I had told everybody with two ears, even sometimes even if they only had one, I was still pitching them the fight in their one good ear. But I told everybody that would listen that this fight would be fantastic, that this was the best, most competitive on paper female fight of all time boxing or MMA. Number one versus number two. Just the first two women headlining Madison Square Garden. I mean, where do you end? This was the fight of the year. This thing lived up past potential. I would have been very grateful if this was just a good fight, you know, a good enough fight with all the stakes that I just laid out, and that it went through. Either way, I would have been pleased with that. But this was special, you guys. This was nothing short of special. These women are fantastic. They're absolute warriors. I've watched this fight 4 times over now. And to also really kind of break down the rounds. So let's start there. And then where we'll finish is with Canelo versus Bivol. So starting with Taylor Serrano. I gave so we used to do this on this channel. Let's break down the rounds, why I thought they won. Let's do that here. This fight's extremely deserving of that. So upon my initial watch of it, in the moment, I thought the fight should have been a draw. And first off, I was very scared for Katie Taylor in that round 5. And also in round 6, because she wasn't incredibly hurt again in round 6, but she still looked like she just never had recovered from surviving round 5 and through the break in between 5 and 6. She just looked like she didn't recover still, and that really scared me. Then we got into the later rounds, but initially I thought draw. Upon rewatch, that's only because I was giving Serrano, you know, round 2. And possibly at that time, I forget how I was scoring it live, but maybe even gave her 3. I've watched this fight 4 times over, though, as I just said. So I have a really good take to lay out in front of you guys. Basically, at the end of the day, if you called it a draw, that's not wrong. That's nothing that nobody can ever be mad at you or say you're wrong for that, because this fight was draw worthy. Nobody likes getting a draw, but it means the rematch. Thankfully, it looks like we will probably see a rematch of this fight again, especially just from how well it did money-wise. And this is a money business, so even though we are fans who enjoyed watching the fight, and that's why we want another fight, we probably will get that other fight because of how lucrative this fight was to the promotion, how they sold out Madison Square Garden, headlining it, putting other good fights that were on this undercard to shame. I scored round 1 for Katie Taylor every way through, but it's a bit of a dull enough round. They're just not dull, but they're finding their range, so all the little prodding jabs, nothing lands. I heard a statistic that only 2 goddamn jabs were landed in this fight. That is absurd. That is absurd. That is crazy. And it shows you what these women came in here with the intention to do, is put on a war. And hopefully one of them wouldn't make it out of it. But they both did. They both saw the final bell. But yeah, always gave Taylor round 1. Round 2's close. You could give that round to Serrano. But I've watched it 4 times over. It didn't take until the last time or anything to actually, change my mind on that. 2 is close, but after second, rewatch, I'm giving that to Katie Taylor. And round 3 is close because Serrano is doing very good work in the first half of that round, but the second half of that round, it kind of falls apart. And the thing that people don't see is they see all the aggression of Amanda Serrano, they see the volume punching, and they see the ring generalship, which does count for something, that Amanda Serrano was walking Katie Taylor down. Katie Taylor's the one turning back and forth and trying to stay off the ropes, but constantly moving around the ring. And sometimes that throws people off. You have to have an eye for a counter fighter. You really do, because the counter fighter is going to land the cleaner shots. And that's what Katie Taylor was doing. And it becomes pretty clear, I would think, in the second half of that round 3 that Katie Taylor's landing very flush shots on the chin of Amanda Serrano. And it is mainly always the left hook counter as well. And then round 4, this is where we start leaning Serrano. I think that's a pretty good Serrano round. And then round 5 is the most dominant round of the fight, and that is Amanda Serrano round. I am very impressed that Katie Taylor didn't go down from that. I mean, not only was I rooting for Katie Taylor, I love both these women. But being Irish, I'm going to root for Katie Taylor. But like I told you, I was very scared because I've never seen Katie Taylor hurt like that before. And she has been challenged before, but never hurt in such a way. And her legs were buckling. And it's not just that, oh, she's hurt and look at her take more shots. She's got a chin. There's more to it than that I can see in there, which is like, not only is she hurt, she's really hurt because she's actually going to be, the reason she's taking other shots is because instead of being hurt and being like, I'm hurt, but my legs are with me, so I'm going to back up, her legs weren't there. So she knew she couldn't be backing up and get caught with a shot that would make her go down. So it's an old veteran trick is be more aggressive, lean into the opponent and start throwing punches back. But you're almost like, if your legs aren't there, you're almost falling over and catching yourself from getting one of those knees down by bumping straight into your opponent constantly. And then when you get close enough, hold for a bit. That's what Katie Taylor did, but even that just was impressively, she didn't go down from hard shots from Amanda Serrano. But yeah, that round 5 was scary. Not only did she not go down, but she was very hurt, and then she made it through 5, and I thought, okay, that was bad, but this is okay, because she made it through the worst of it. And it wasn't at the tail end of that round, okay? It's about halfway through, so you got a full minute. It was actually over. She was hurt before the halfway mark of the round, because they're only 2-minute rounds. She was very hurt, and it was almost a full round to go that she had to survive through that, and she did. So I thought, okay, that's good, and then now she'll get the rest. But she came out in 6 and looked flat and looked like she didn't fully recover from that. And she definitely lost 6. She also definitely lost 7. And then round 8 is where we start seeing some not incredible offense or anything, but some getting her feet back under her from Katie Taylor, where she can use her movement again and box and pick her shots from the outside, and she did that, and I thought she won round 8. Then she handedly won round 9. That was the best Katie Taylor round of the fight. And round 10, I do give to Irish Katie Taylor as well. But round 10 is very close, okay? And that's part of where all the 400 watches over, come into play is Go back and watch Untitled. Now, you don't even have to watch the whole round and do some crazy, oh, I'm doing some crazy breakdown. Like, even if you look at the highlights, it's the most famous highlight of that fight is the last 10 seconds of that 10th and final round when they're trading shots back and forth. I thought Katie was winning the round handedly before that, but that is almost set up to be like, one, it does show you how great the fight was, so I get that, but it's also almost set up like, look at Katie Taylor going to... Now, that little exchange there at the end, Amanda Serrano's getting the better of that, okay? She's landing the shots. If you take turns watching it back and forth and take turns on which girl's face you're watching, Katie Taylor's getting popped by some of those shots. Now, she does land on Amanda Serrano, but they're not with so much authority. So at the end of the day, I gave Taylor, round 1, round 2, round 3. So that's 3 rounds. And then I gave her 8, 9, and 10 for Katie Taylor. So I scored it 6-4 for Irish Katie Taylor at the end of the day. But that was coming around from a draw that I initially thought, and that I still don't think is far off. But yeah, fantastic fight. Interesting how Eddie Hearn after is throwing out there. I don't know enough about, they call it football in other countries, but soccer, which is extremely, the number one sport in most other countries outside of America. Certainly so, again, in Ireland as everywhere else in Europe. But I don't know enough about that sport to know any real Irish play. I don't really follow, soccer that much, so I can't really speak on this. But Eddie Hearn is saying Katie Taylor might be the greatest Irish athlete of all time, or most accomplished Irish athlete of all time. So that wouldn't mean money like you would think Conor McGregor. That would mean accomplishments, which Conor has a lot of too, but he's kind of fallen short. Katie Taylor's still undefeated. Katie Taylor's a gold medal Olympian in boxing, something that other Irish fighters were not known for being able to do. So she had that before coming, you have to realize, before coming into her pro career. Okay, and then she excelled in her pro career, blowing girls away, stopping girls in the beginning. Then they immediately started giving her very tough fights. She was in a division that is the only division in women's boxing that has many great women fighters like, Delphine Persoon, and like Jessica McCaskill, and like Natasha Jonas. And these are all victims of Katie Taylor. And now she gets to add Amanda Serrano in a performance where she was an underdog to win there. There's a real debate there. And there is no debate about Katie Taylor being the most accomplished Irish boxer, man or woman, of all time. So, yeah, we'll end that segment on that. And then moving on to the Canelo Bivol fight, Demetrius Bivol. So listen, Bivol fought a guy that I like a lot, Joe Smith Jr., and he won. But before he won, Bivol got hurt. Okay, he got hurt in that fight because Joe Smith Jr. can punch. But Joe Smith Jr. is by no means fast. He is not fast. He just can punch, and he is very durable. But he hurt the hell out of Demetrius Bivol, and the reason that he hurt Demetrius Bivol is to the body. Demetrius Bivol is kind of notorious in all his wins and all his greatness, and he has been great, and this is a great fight. But he is known for, like Katie Taylor, like I'd mentioned in the previous podcast, kind of ignoring body shots. Kind of just holding that guard up and not worrying about, is he faking? Do I go down low? He just kind of ignores them and lets them fly on them. And then he'll try to counter you while you're doing that. Now, who's the greatest body puncher in boxing? It's probably Canelo Alvarez's left hook to the liver that is lightning fast and very forceful. And he also will find room for his entire fist between your elbow and your fucking and the top of your trunks in an inch space. He'll find room for his whole goddamn fist to fit in there somehow. He is lightning quick with it. I think that's going to be a big factor in this fight. I think he'll score to the body a lot on Bivol. I think that Demetrius Bivol certainly wins a lot of the opening rounds of this fight. I think that it's similar to the Caleb Plant thing and the uh, Billy Joe Saunders fight as well, where Canelo got them out of there in fantastic fashion. But you got to see before that happened that there is a bit of a bias that does exist because he is possibly the most famous boxer, and he is certainly the greatest boxer that is actively fighting today. So there is some bias about watching him, and that does not stop at the commentators. It doesn't stop at the fans. There it goes to the commentators. It goes sometimes to the judges. And it doesn't mean that things are crooked or there's conspiracies to be had about it. What it means is that the man is so great and his style is so good because not only does he hit hard, but he doesn't usually walk guys down and just, at least right away. He is incredibly defensive. His head movement is absolutely on point. Now he can he can do the Philly shell and roll on his shoulder, or, punches off his shoulder as well. He'll just use head movement. He's fantastically quick at countering fighters, and he has built his physique up in such a way as to lean into his power punching ability. And now here he is again at light heavyweight. And I just think that Bivol will win some of these early rounds, but you might not hear about it on the broadcast. You should really use your own eyes to watch, because it's part of appreciating also Canelo's greatness, is that you have to see that these are not people he's running over. These are always very tough fights against the best fighters in whatever many divisions he is moving around in. That has been his whole career. So it's part of appreciating him is to appreciate the opponent and what they're able to do. Because Caleb Plant had some success. Billy Joe Saunders, made an ass of himself making that comment about never quitting and then quitting because he got his orbital bone broken. But he was doing damn well in that fight before that happened. I thought Arislandi Lara beat Canelo Alvarez, okay? So there's a lot to be taken on respecting the opponents of Canelo, and I think there's a lot of respect to be had for Bivol and what he has accomplished. He is a world champion there at light heavyweight. This is not exactly like the Kovalev fight in the sense of the risk, because that was greatness anyway, that he's moving up that far to light heavyweight the first time in fighting the bone crusher Kovalev. But Kovalev was older. Kovalev was already a little washed. You can say that it's not an easy fight. And because of the size difference, if nothing else. But that one was a softer touch as you could possibly have at such a higher weight class. This one is not. This one's more meat in the middle. It is not Arturo Beterbiev, but it is right before then. It is the equivalent. Joe Smith Jr. and Dimitri Bivol, are the guys right there as well, that are the best in the division. And now we're going to see one of those guys fight Canelo. So I think he wins some of those early rounds, but that it's not really impressed on the audience via the commentators on the fight. And then I think that Canelo picks it back up. I think that Canelo realizes that he's going, I think the game plan is, as always, to put the guy away later. If the opportunity presents itself, of course, he's going to take it earlier, but I think Canelo's always game plan is that I can rely so much on my skills that these guys can be bigger, and I can have a hard time finding my way to the inside through their jab. Now, here's an interesting fact. Dimitris Bivol's not known for backing up and jabbing, which people would say is maybe the way to fight Canelo when you have such a reach and you're so much bigger. But Canelo's a bad boy and he hits real hard anyway, so maybe backing up and using that reach and jabbing. Bivol don't back up, really. Bivol will try to push the pace. He will stick that jab in Canelo's face a lot, but he's going to be trying to come forward with it. He's not comfortable, as much fighting off the back foot. He's not going to do Caleb Plant kind of, defensive things in there and head movement. So it's a different fight. And I do think that Canelo wins, but if you want a more dangerous, risky pick, let's go round 11. Let's go TKO round 11. And then if you can't bet on this, but maybe to the body, huh? Maybe Canelo tummy tucks him, one for your boy, the body snatcher. Yeah, it was a great weekend of fights. It was fantastic. Shakur Stevenson as well. I mean, that happened. I forgot to touch on that because there's not much to speak of. It's exactly as I said. You know that even a guy as great as Oscar Valdez is, was not gonna be able to do this because it's a styles make fights kind of thing, man. And he is great. And Oscar Valdez will have a lot more success in his career to come. But he does need guys to fight with him. He is not built for a style where he can land in a reckless way coming forward on a guy that is a fucking wizard in there defensively, as Shakur Stevenson is. And then Shakur just gets confident enough eventually to start walking you down with the jab and not even bothering to back up. Shakur did stand there in the pocket with him later on in that fight and just fought with him. And Shakur didn't really hit that hard, but his physique, his body is very big. He looked bigger. And that's why he's meant for 135. When he goes up to 135, you know, I don't know when. Like I said, he could try to take the belts from Gutierrez and the Japanese Agawa, I think it is, that holds the last two belts. And those guys are such easy money for him. I mean, I don't blame him if he does that, just to say I unified that whole division, which is stacked, by the way. I mean, 130 is stacked, but nobody can beat Shakur Stevenson there. And then moving up for the only big money fights at 135, and also moving up because you're huge at 130, and you literally will not be, oh, guy moving up. This is a case of a guy that has drained himself through his career to have all these accomplishments at 130, and then the career plan, you know, mark my words, is to be at 135 as a natural 135er. And yeah, him and Loma would be absolutely epic. But I don't know if we end up seeing that. But man, wouldn't that be great? Him and Tank, him and Ryan Garcia, him and Cambosis. You could just pick anybody. Devin Haney. I think he schools Devin Haney. They both have the same kind of styles they want to impose on one another, and I don't think that the young Devin Haney is I think he's a guy that's very good at that style, so he kind of relies, as Shakur does, on a lot of opponents coming forward on him, throwing the punches. He's not a power puncher, you know, Devin Haney. He's the same kind of thing. Back up, very evasive, very good, very sound defensively, and then tries to let it go a little earlier and make sure he's winning all those last rounds. When you see Shakur Stevenson coming out there and winning those first rounds and on Oscar Valdez, that was always the only hope that Oscar Valdez had, was winning a bunch of those first rounds before he inevitably, you know, tires from being the guy that's more active, fighting a bigger man, who's gonna drag you in later on. You know, that, so when you see Shakur Stevenson coming out winning those first rounds, we know we're in trouble, right? This guy's gonna be like a Floyd Mayweather. Not just because he's great, plenty of guys are great, but there is no other guy in boxing that I could say is gonna be like Floyd, where then it's not just about that they are great, that's part of it, and then also that their style literally will look like Floyd, and people won't be able to hit him. And they can kind of make a mockery of people. The best, very best in boxing, they can kind of make a mockery of them sometimes, and just almost be like a cat playing with a dead mouse, you know, instead of a boxing match. That's Shakur Stevenson for you. But yeah, so go back and check that last episode, because listen, the good thing about doing this podcast is not only do I want to shout out, you know, my cousin's show and those guys over at NU MMA show, but it was a great weekend of picks for your boy, and also that's the good thing about doing the show. It's giving receipts. So just like when I'm wrong, you know, which is usually I'll sometimes pick favorites. I'll pick 8 fights, and I'll get one wrong. It happens. But usually when that happens, people will be aware of it or see, listen, I couldn't have been more detailed, and no one could have given you better, more detailed, more broken down picks. They just couldn't have. The fights played out exactly as I said last weekend. So fuck yeah, let's go me, huh? Until next time, loyal fight fans, stay loyal and enjoy the Canelo fight. Definitely have a Corona with a lime for it because the weather's getting nice, and because Viva la Mexico, and because we're gonna see one of the greats in action. God bless. Be safe.